thank you Housing Works and Blaine making this happen, and Ryan for reporting. My name is August, and I'm the president of the LGBTQ History Project, a nonprofit dedicated to preserving the lives and legacies of LGBTQ activists and elders from the first wave of gay liberation. We have an all-star panel who has dedicated most of their life to advancing civil rights. They're all members of the New York Gay Liberation Front, the pioneering gay activist group founded in the aftermath of the June 28, 1969 Stonewall Rebellion. Shortly after the group's formation, they kickstarted a mass movement, and gay liberation fronts popped up all over the world. Before Gay Liberation Front, gay rights were advanced by homophile organizations that preached assimilation equals acceptance. They seemingly preferred a supplicant's role rather than reveling in each other's individuality. When we talk about the Gay Liberation Front, we need to emphasize the word liberation. Liberation is about complete freedom. This is really the first time that gay people fought back, blood, marches, and billy clubs, out of the closet into the streets. During this time, it's important to keep in mind that homosexuality was psychopathological and illegal in most places, and there was no same-sex dancing in Pride Month, and there wasn't even a Pride Month. So it's going to be impossible to give a complete bio of everyone, but we'll keep it short. Perry Brass, who edited the Gay Liberation Front's magazine Come Out, Flavia Rando, who learned about the Gay Liberation Front when she ran into its co-founder on the 14th Street crosstown bus, and Michela Griffo, who, along with other lesbians in the GLF, was adamant about getting the gay bars out of the mafia's hands. So I want to start by painting the scene about what shaped y'all. Perry, you grew up in the South, and Michela, you grew up in upstate New York. Do you mind talking a little bit about your childhood, your relationship with your parents, and what shaped you?
Well,
maybe just grab it.
I'll grab it. Hello? Is it on? You can hear me? Wonderful. Okay, first I want to say, I love talking about GLF. I was in GLF for almost 3 years. One of the lies about GLF was that it only existed for 6 months. But I was in it for 3 years, and they were the 3 most formative years of my life. I learned more at the Gay Liberation Front than I did at NYU, getting a degree from NYU. I described it as being like having a graduate course in politics, in living, in ethics, in so much. I grew up in the South in the 50s and 60s. In the 50s and 60s.
It comes on and off.
Closer? Okay.
Sorry, we're trying to get the sound.
Okay. I got it. I think it's working now. Okay. I grew up in the South in the 50s and 60s, and I like to describe my growing up as I belonged to 4 self-excluding groups. I grew up Southern, Jewish, gay, and poor. I mean, you can't get 4 groups that hate each other more than those 4 groups, I think. I realized I was gay by the time I was about 12, and I had to hide it, and I went through just hell with it, of being oppressed and bullied. When I was 11, my father died of cancer, throwing my family, my sister and mother, into abject poverty. The worst aspect of my growing up, I guess, was at the age of 15, like a lot of other gay teens, I tried to kill myself. It was just a boiling point in my life of being persecuted at school and having problems with my mother at home. And emerging from that suicide attempt, I came up with a couple of epiphanal moments in this part of my life. One of them was I realized what I was, but I had not come out, and I decided that I would be the person that I was meant to be, no matter what. God, to go from suicide to that. The other thing was that if anyone stood in the way of me being this person that I needed to be, they were just over with. The next year was my senior year in high school because I graduated at the age of 16, and I became one of the most popular kids in my high school. I developed this total fuck you attitude and became extremely popular. It was wonderful. I'm not quite sure how I can go from that to joining the Gay Liberation Front, but I will say this. I came out very, very much. By the time I was 17, I was openly gay. But what I really wanted was to have a family. And one of the great moments in my life was at my first meeting that I attended of GLF, which was in November of 1969. Less than 2 months after my 22nd birthday, Bob Kohler, who was the elder statesman of GLF, I was 22, Bob was 44, and he was kind of like the daddy to the street kids. He got up in front of the group, which at that point was about 100 people in a room in a church, and he said, "Welcome, sisters and brothers." That's where we always couch things in GLF, with sisters and brothers, women and men, because women are an oppressed class, and GLF was very into dealing with our own oppression. So he said, "Welcome, sisters and brothers," and I knew at that point that I had to be GLF.
Michela?
What about Flavia?
Well, she's coming up.
Oh, okay.
Does this work? Oh,
Yeah.
this one works, so.
Okay, well, I had a kind of roundabout way of getting to the GLF.
I come from a violent alcoholic home, and I left home very young and came to New York. But I was not gay as a young person. I didn't even know such a thing existed. I was in a convent school. And so my introduction to radicalism came when I was 16 years old. I went to Harlem with a friend of mine. She had to get an illegal abortion, and I was so horrified by what I saw that I came back down into the city and I joined what was called the Red Stockings. We were the first group that was going to change the abortion laws in New York. So I got used to being spit on and hit and arrested. By the time I got to the GLF, I was like, oh, okay, I've already been through this. And then I joined the National Organization for Women later on. And I realized then, because by then I had met a woman. I used to go to the Red Stocking meetings. They were at the Washington Square Methodist Church, where it was a hotbed of radicals. It was the Panthers, the Young Lords. We all used to meet there. And one day, this very attractive woman, a Swedish woman, came up to me and she said, "Would you like to go out for coffee?" And I thought she wanted to talk about, the Red Stockings. Long story short, for 6 months, and then she asked me if I wanted to go to Andy Warhol's party. Well, I'm a student at Pratt by now. Of course, I wanted to go to Andy Warhol's party. So, it was my introduction to a whole new way of life, including the fact that I had no idea for 6 months that I was dating this woman, because the thought just never occurred to me until one night she said, "Some night you come and stay with Agneta, yes?" And I said, "Oh, that would be fun." And she kissed me. And from that moment on, I never even called myself bisexual. But the thing that happened is, at that time, I was in a consciousness raising group. The feminists had this consciousness raising group. And I thought everybody was going to be thrilled. But I go and I tell them, now I'm dating and in love with a woman. They're like, "Oh, you're going to lose your apartment. You're going to be thrown out of your home." I'm like, what in the world? I'm the same person I am. I was supposed to marry my fiance. I was living with him when Stonewall happened. I was living with the man I was going to marry on Horatio Street. And now they're telling me because I love a woman, all hell's going to break loose. This is unacceptable. That is what brought me to the Gay Liberation Front. The fact that what was happening in the women's movement, calling lesbians, lavender menace, lavender herrings, that this was unacceptable. I'm the same person I was when I was living as a heterosexual. I am now a proud lesbian, and I'm not going to have anyone tell me that I'm going to lose my house and my job and everything else. So that's how I ended up. And when just much like Perry said, when I walked in, it was like, men in dresses, women in leather. It was like, wow, this is the future. It was just great. So that's my story.
And Flavia, you grew up in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
To most people, growing up in New York feels like we're in the center of the world, right? Did you realize you were in an extremely diverse hub?
Well, I knew that, but I did not
experienced it.
Closer.
Oh, I knew that, but I didn't experience it in my life because I was the child of I was the first generation.
Can everyone hear? Please,
The mic is not on.
can you speak out? We might have to ditch the mics. Pretty close.
Okay. Let me try again. How's that?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right,
Okay. Okay. I was the first generation of Sicilian immigrant parents. We refer to everyone who was not in our family friendship group, who were all Sicilian immigrants, as the Americans. And as is traditional in Sicily, I grew up in a very protected, enclosed household. I couldn't go, back to school, for example, at 15 for an event. But, however, that kind of protected me against internalized homophobia. Because when I fell in love with a woman, no problem. I just didn't know there was such a thing. And I think it did protect me. But prior to that, I started going to the village because I read Jack Kerouac. And I said, thank God there are people like me in this world. Thank God. And so I came out at 17 and moved to what is now the East Village, was then the Lower East Side, with my lover. Their life was maybe less than fun. We were stoned in the streets, harassed, stopped in our tracks, and finally our apartment was destroyed, totally. Door taken off the hinges, everything chaos. Well, we moved to another apartment, and the apartment, the spare apartment, that we had to keep for safety from my family who knew about guns. Okay, so after I was out about for 1.5, 2 years, we're talking about 1962, I had heard of the DOB, Daughters of Belitis. So I said, I am going to join. I need someone behind me. I want to work with people. This just doesn't go for me. So I went. Ironically, it's in a building. There's a huge office building on Broadway between 9th Street. And the Daughters of Belitis had a tiny room. I mean, maybe as big as this space we're in right now. And the appointment was at night. The office building was closed down. And I went through the dark halls into the office building, into the room. And they looked at me and I looked at them. And I don't know who was more scared. Because I was maybe 18 and a half and scared out of my wits. Not scared of them, just scared. And I didn't know that their very first part of their rules to organize by was everyone has to be over 21. They were terrified of being arrested for, enticing a minor. I can't remember any other term right now. Seducing, yes, thank you. Seducing a minor. So we sat there and had a there were two other lesbians there, not very old, probably around 30. And we spoke for an hour, but nobody had the nerve, the courage to say the word lesbian. And that was my first exchange with the movement. And I said, there's got to be something better than this. And I tried going to Mattachine, that didn't work. We found kind of a gay men's social club called the Corduroy Club. Anybody here ever heard of that? And they were very accepting and very welcoming. Then Martha Shelley. I had known Martha for a while, mostly from bars. I don't really remember how we met. And in July July, early July, after I had gone up to see Stonewall, not see Stonewall, but to see the streets, how they had changed after the Stonewall Revolution. Anyway, about a week later, there's Martha Shelley on the 14th Street. Oh, Martha says, we're starting a new organization, the GLF. Do you want to join? And I said, I have been waiting for this all my life, and that's exactly how I felt. So I was in GLF from early July 1969. And that's that. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, Harry and Michela, do you want to talk about how you heard about Stonewall?
Oh, that's easy. I think I'm one of the very few people of my generation who will admit I was not at Stonewall. I was around the corner at Julius's, which some of you may not know is another bar in the West Village. Julius's is maybe one of the oldest bars in certainly in New York City, and by the time of Stonewall, it had actually become a openly gay bar. When I first came to New York, it was a sporting bar, and there was a certain amount of very furtive kind of gay activity in the front, and not in the back. And it very quickly, within the space of about 1 year, on 1967 or 68, it suddenly became gay, and also very, very mafia controlled. But I was in Julius's the actual night of Stonewall, and some people came in, some guys came in, and this is what they said. They said, the girls are rioting at Stonewall. So I thought, well, what else is new? What else would you do at Stonewall? I mean, I used to go there myself to dance, and there were a lot of what we used to call street queens at Stonewall, and they could become very rambunctious. I didn't realize that they were really rioting, that things were really going on there. And so the next day, I was back at Julius's, and I decided I'll go out and see what's going on. So I went out the second day and saw what was going on, and it was just amazing. That whole area around Stonewall had become like this theater of activism and rebellion, certainly of a historical nature. The cops had put out what are called riot lights. There was huge lighting, so it was very, very theatrical. There was glass in the streets. There were some cars with windshields smashed, and there were probably about 400 or 500 people out there in front of the Stonewall, and you just knew that something amazing had happened. And then the rest of the summer, things were really going on, and you could feel that the community in the West Village was changing really fast. And I would say that what Stonewall did was it gave a lot of people permission to be what they needed to be and do what they needed to do. There are all these ideas about who did what at Stonewall, et cetera, et cetera. But the reality was we were really ready for it to happen.
Well, I wasn't at Stonewall either. I don't think any lesbian was, other than crazy Marilyn Fowler, who started the whole riot thing. But anyway, I want to just talk quickly about something about the personality of a lot of the people that came to the Gay Liberation Front. As I said, I was living with the man I was going to marry when Stonewall occurred, and he's been my boyfriend since I was 12 years old. I was taking college classes when I was 12, and he was 17, a freshman at the University of Rochester. And we went out all those years, and in December of 1968, I was supposed to meet his family. I had never met his family before because they were Orthodox Jewish. And I got all dressed up. We went out there for Hanukkah, I think it was, and the door opened, and his mother and two grandmothers were sitting on this couch, and all I heard was, shiksa. And I had no idea what that meant, but anyway, that was the beginning of the end. But the reason I want to talk about I was always very involved in radical activism. I think we all were before Stonewall even occurred. Many of the people that came there, they were from the Students for Democratic Society. I'd gone to the University of Michigan as an undergrad where it was founded. Many of us came from the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement. And so we were, I was so proud of the gays when they, finally, no, we've had enough. And so that I also met Martha Shelley and many of the women who would be in the GLF because I was a student at Pratt, and there was an underground newspaper called The Rat. It was a radical underground newspaper on the Lower East Side. And this is before I even joined the women's movement, and it was when I was in the Red Stockings. They needed somebody to do paste up and mechanicals, which is how newspapers were put together. And it was so radical that the front cover, the day I went there, said, "Jane, you left the water running." It was Jane Elpert, who had been part of the Weathermen and had to go underground. So anyway, I was very exposed to radical life, radical people, men and women. And so by the time I got to the Gay Liberation Front and realized that I was one of them, I was more than ready to put my life on the line. I was watching something the other day and I forgot who it was about. Oh, yes, it was about Martin Luther King. And one of the things he said is, if you want to change the world, you have to be willing to put your life on the line. And I think I can say that all of us, we were willing to put our lives on the line.
I was just wanted to say something about this term. Oh, is it?
Only that one.
Okay. I just wanted to say something about that term radical. GLF was a radical organization. We wanted a total change in the American government. Most of us were either socialists or out communists. I had started out, I was actually an exception. I had no radical background. I was almost apolitical before I joined GLF. But the idea of radicalism in GLF took a different kind of turn, and that was, to us, radicalism meant going to the very root of the situation, which is where the word radical comes from. It's where the word radius comes from, because it goes to the center out. The word radish is a root. What we wanted to look at was, what were the roots of our oppression, and what could we do to change this? This idea of looking at the root of our oppression and the root of the situation became part of the GLF mindset, and I'd love to talk about that later.
Thank you. Let's see, I don't quite know where to begin, but the first one that came to me, because there's so much to talk about, Harry sort of triggered the idea that in the very first issue of the GLF newspaper, Come Out, of course, the first line of the editorial was, "We are going to change the world by changing our own consciousness." Now, what can be more at the root of anything than that?
Total.
Right. Okay, sort of to backtrack a little, I didn't mean to imply I wasn't Stonewall. I did take a pilgrimage from the depths of the Lower East Side to the site of Stonewall the day after I read about it in the New York Times. A little like that much, right? Those people bothering the rest of us again is basically the tone of it all. And, I saw I smelled the smoke. The trash cans were still on fire. There was litter everywhere. And I thought, finally. That's it. I can't really remember that. It took everything else from my mind. Yeah. I do actually now. Because it had been very difficult living as a young person without a community, I really did not trust straight people, and I refused to ally with them. I didn't care anything else about them. I had betrayal. Okay, thank you. I had been betrayed so many times by the one straight person here or there that I tried to engage with, including a therapist who tried to get me incarcerated when I told him I was a lesbian. I mean, really, it was a world That was unbelievable. Really unbelievable. It was hard to get down the street, and it was hard to go anywhere to find any kind of allies, help, or anything. Okay.
I just want to add one thing. You see the way I'm dressed? In 1969, I would be arrested for the way I'm dressed because I'm not wearing 3 pieces of feminine clothing. That's how dangerous it was to be a lesbian in 1969 and 70.
The first time my partner and I tried to go to the Sea Colony, a kind of famous women's bar, in 69, 68, 7, 67, I don't remember. The bouncer at the door said, "You girls can't come in because we were raided yesterday and you don't have skirts on." And boy, did he enjoy saying that as he looked us up and down. That was my first experience at a prison.
Yeah, that's a really paints the scene. So let's talk about some of the early actions. You know, part of the reason I think these are important is because there's so many events and stories that would be lost. Perry, you told me about Gay May Day, which
Yes.
I had not heard of before.
Yeah.
Michela, if you want to speak, going to the Sea Colony, the mafia control of the bars.
Well, one of the things we did in GLF was what we called actions. And we would very often plan the actions at the Sunday night meetings. One of the situations about the Gay Liberation Front was that people who went to the Sunday night meetings often thought, "Oh my God, these are crazy!" Like they were confrontational, they were contentious, and it was because we were a radical group, and radical groups are contentious. There was a certain amount of contention going on. One of the things that I was going to say, we did a number of actions while I was in GLF. I was probably involved at least in a dozen over those 3 years. And when I say actions, I mean like these were really confrontational situations, difficult situations, situations where, as we said, we were putting our bodies and our lives on the line, and they were. And I was a scary fairy. That's all I can say. I mean, sometimes these things really did unnerve me, and I respected and loved my brothers and sisters who were much more confrontational than I was. But in the spring of 1971, there was a huge convocation in Washington, D.C. That was put together by the Vietnam Moratorium Committee to shut down Washington. And groups from anti-war groups from all over America descended on Washington for 3 days to shut down the government. So the person who was organizing this was a man named Rennie Davis. And I don't know if any of you remember Rennie Davis, but he was the head of the Vietnam Moratorium Committee, and he was one of the chief anti-war activists. And people were sure that Rennie Davis was gay, and he was not out. Is it better? Yeah, he was not out of the closet.
Much better.
Oh, better? Okay. He was not out of the closet, but I'm pretty sure Rennie decided that there should be a component of the May Day demonstrations that was going to be Gay May Day. So, mostly men, on some women, from every GLF in the country sent people to Washington to be a part of Gay May Day. There were people from, of course, from the New York GLF, from the Washington GLF, from the Atlanta GLF, from San Francisco and LA's GLF, from Ann Arbor, Michigan's GLF, from Lawrence, Kansas's GLF. So there were, at this point, about 150 of us involved in Gay May Day. This was the first, what I call the first true gathering of the gay tribe. That you had people from all over the country who were radical queers descending on Washington to shut down the government. And I arrived on a Friday. It had a full day on a Saturday, I believe, and everything, the shit hit the fan on Monday, and because that was a regular working day. And a lot of the Gay May Day people, our objective was to shut down an important bridge between downtown Washington and the suburbs. So my brothers and I, and I said brothers because most of them were brothers. I didn't know if the sisters were in another place. Anyway, we held that bridge for an hour before the cops came, and it was pretty horrifying. Yes, it was. I mean, I'm very shattered even talking about it. The cops came, and as we say, they came with nightsticks and tear gas, and I managed to escape, but several of my New York GLF brothers, they were arrested and put in prison, and they had to basically buy their way out. Really hard, especially in those days. Like you couldn't just give them a credit card, you had to come up with cash in order to get the fuck out of jail. To me, that was like a significant event, certainly for the gay liberation movement, the idea that we could be involved with the rest of what we called the movement, which was the peace movement, the civil rights movement, the women's movement. We could exert that kind of effort and strength. So that was wonderful to me.
Okay, so we can hand this to you. I think it is.
One of the things that Flavia and I have in common is we're both first-generation Americans. My family came from the north of Italy, but my grandmother was Sicilian. And anyway, so that was become very important when the GLF women decided that we had had enough of these lesbian bars where these mafiosos stood in the doorway, and the drinks were very expensive, and there was a woman named Cookie who ran this bar on 14th Street, and she'd come along, and the whole thing was like, push the drinks, push the drinks. You wouldn't even finish with your drink. She'd put her finger in your drink and say, oh, it's warm, you need another one. I mean, it was just so oppressive. They were all oppressive, the Sea Colony, Gianni's, all of them. So when the Gay Liberation Front decided that this was going to be one of our actions, it was decided that because Flavia and I were Italian, that we were going to stand outside of these bars with these leaflets and hand them out as the girls were going in. And some of the girls, unfortunately, didn't think, and they brought the leaflet into the bar, and there's one place where we were standing outside Cookie's one, and this big mafiosos come out, and they're start running down the street, and all they yelled out was, non toccare, io sono sangue, don't touch me, I'm blood, which is real Sicilian, io sono sangue. I could have been Carlo Gambino's daughter for all that we knew, but we kept picketing, and there's a famous picture of all, I should have brought it for the lesbians in front of Cookies. But anyway, so the Gay Liberation Front women started having all of these dances to get women out of the bars and into a safe space because those bars, we were the mafia's cash cow. Lesbians could, the guys had trucks, they had the parks, they had the streets, they could meet, guys anywhere. But lesbians were not we weren't like, prowling the parks, Central Park for women. So, we decided we had it. So we had these great dances, and these dances started, we were very successful. One night, we were at Alternate U, which is right down the street from Cookies. And their bars were starting to be emptied out because the women all found out, they were having a lot of fun, and there was this long stairwell to get up to the second floor where we were having our dance, and I'm standing there, and all of a sudden the door opens, and I saw the guns. First thing I saw were the guns, and I slammed the money box, because we used to charge like $3 and you could get a beer or whatever. I slammed the money box, I handed it to Donna Gottschalk, another one of our members, and put this in the garbage bag and run down the back stairs as fast as you could go. And so she's running down the back stairs, and they come up, and I said, can I help you, gentlemen? Just like, and so, they're like, we want the money, woo-woo. I said, well, we don't charge anything. I said, these dances are free. I said, you're welcome to stay and dance if you want. So now they're getting really angry. So they put the gun right up to my side of my head. They go, if you don't stop this, we're going to kill you. And I said, well, then you may as well shoot me right here in front of everyone, because we're not going to stop. And then they made the mistake of going over to Martha Shelley, because she looked like a little angel, blue round glasses. And they go to Martha and they go, do you know who we are? They're shouting in her face, do you know who we are? And so Martha goes, no, and I don't care. Do you know who we are? We're the Gay Liberation Front, and we're going to put you out of business. And we did. So, this was before the first Gay Pride March. The mafia wanted the lesbians
mafia wanted us dead, so.
Speaking of that, Flavia, did you ever get any threats? Your house was destroyed, you were stoned in the streets. Do you remember any threats? People threatening you or the Gay Liberation Front?
Well, this was prior to the Gay Liberation Front in general. I had moved away from that apartment. Threats, that's such an abstraction, a threat. When you have the person in front of you and you could, as Michela said, spit on them instead. That's real, you know. I don't think these people were really about threats. And since, as far as the house breaking, I think that was, people thought we didn't quite fit, maybe we have money. I really don't know what possibly. Also, 2 unprotected young women in New York City in 1962 was practically an invitation. For what? You know, for Kitty Genovese.
Exactly, I was thinking exactly
For
of her.
example, you know, you have no right to your own life alone without a man protecting your father, your husband.
They
your
might not
brother.
know who Kitty was.
I don't.
Kitty Genovese, in the Queen?
Yes.
Yes.
In
Queen,
Gardens.
she was a lesbian, I think moderately closeted.
Yeah.
And she was murdered in front of her building, screaming for help. And it was a huge apartment building, and nobody even called.
Yeah. It went on for, it was very famous. It went on for 45 minutes. This man was stabbing her for 45 minutes when she was screaming, and no one came to her.
Everybody
her
heard
aid.
it, but nobody helped.
And no one came, and it really, it marked a moment in New York. It became an international case.
But it's true. But I'm going to talk about something a little different. The other kind of action that GLF did. We didn't just talk about changing our consciousness. We worked very hard to change it. Because we really had to have the support of our sisters and brothers, you know, and it had to go deep. Otherwise, you know, you could just like practically fall over the minute you walked out the door. And so we had a night, a weekend, where we were going to just at random, I forget if it was some kind of, the person next to you, or just people whose eyes locked, but people that we had never spoken to in GLF, we were going to spend as long as we wanted speaking to people. And I remember that I was speaking to a young person, even younger than I at that time. And he, I'm sure, lived on the streets. And we talked, it was a little park in the public housing right across the street from the church. And we sat there and talked until it was so dark we could not see each other's faces any longer. And I felt that was one of the most profound experiences I had in GLF, because I can't say I got to know him, but we got to make a connection and to talk about our lives and to know how much we had in common, and to begin to realize how the world we were living in, the government we were living under, tried to separate people because we had different gender, different race, ethnicity. I was housed and he wasn't. I was in my mid-20s by then, he was in his mid-teens by then. And we were able to talk to each other and see that the way in which we had been separated, separate and rule, divide and conquer.
Yes.
The way we had been separated served no one. And I think that was one of the most important elements of GLF. Anyone who walked in the door was a member for that night. Anyone who had something to say, maybe not anyone. Anyone had the possibility of speaking, but it was so, everybody wanted to speak, so not everyone got to speak at the same moment. But those exchanges really made a difference and left a profound impact on me.
I'd like to just talk a little bit about that. We use this word now, intersectionality, a lot. The idea of bringing in people from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different classes. And GLF was really into that. We didn't have that word, but we were really into that. And the other thing that we were so into, which I feel was part of the Gay Liberation Front mindset, was the idea that gay sexuality, romanticism, and feelings were paramount. They were not just simply some sort of icing at the top of the cake of life that you could and just dismiss, which the queer world, so many people in the queer world prior to GLF, because of their own oppression, really believed that you could not put a real stake, a real store in gay relationships. And GLF did not believe that. That was very much a part of our mindset. We were very much against gay marriage. We thought it was a bourgeois concept, the whole damn 9 yards about that. But we were so involved with the depth and feeling of queer love and relationships that we passed over marriage. We went way over marriage. And when gay marriage came in, when same-sex marriage came in, I should say, I just felt like this is going back to what GLF was all about, that these are the primary relationships in your life, and we really believe that.
I want to say something else.
Should, please.
You know, the way I met Sylvia Rivera was I met him as Ray Rivera when I was working with the Young Lords, which was, again, the intersectionality. This was before I even joined the Gay Liberation Front. I used to work with the Young Lords with the breakfast programs on the Lower East Side. So, this was my introduction again to, the radical Puerto Ricans at the time, and it was just something that, I was very interested in. And so I thought, and the other thing is, I would always say when I was in the Gay Liberation Front, many during the 70s, whatever, you can make all the laws you want, but it's people needing people that's going to change people's minds about what a gay person is. So I feel like when we were out in the streets proud and loud and having these actions and going up against everything from the, all of these organizations, Time Magazine, all these, Washington, D.C., talking in front of the Senate, whatever, they got to see what a gay person in 1970 and beyond actually looked and lived like.
So, we brought up interacting, or y'all brought up interacting with the homophile movement, Daughter Belitis, Machine, assimilation, but when you would meet someone your generation, your peer group, and they weren't a member of the Gay Liberation Front, what did they think about what you were doing?
Do you want to start?
I think we all have that story.
Yeah, right.
Well, it's what I think is really interesting about this, and it's a great question, was that if you were in GLF, everyone was your family. GLF was like this. This was the family I wanted. This was the extended family you wanted. And interestingly enough, and this is kind of a wonderful aside, people had, from the outside, had this idea that everybody in GLF must be having sex with everybody else in GLF. That really didn't go on that much, because you also had incest taboos, like, oh my God, he's my brother, I'm not going to do this yet. So when you met people who were not yet, when you met people who were not in GLF, they were outside of the family, and very often, for myself and for many of my brothers, and I can't speak for women, that was a GLF rule. You don't speak for other people, you speak for yourself and your own group. We felt about it that it was like going now, at this point in my life, it was like going into a foreign country. We could barely understand their lives. GLF was such a part of my mindset, the mindset of so many of my brothers. We had changed our consciousness so much that it was difficult. And I remember one of my wonderful GLF brothers, a guy named Larry Kovacs, he said at a meeting, he said, he's starting to date a non-GLF guy. And I said, what is that like? And he said, Forget about consciousness. They have no consciousness.
Well, of course, I was in the women's movement where Betty Friedan was calling us Lavender Menace. And so, you know, when I was, you know, very active in the GLF, you know, I became very aware of this. But, you know, one of the people that got me into a consciousness raising group was Susan Brown Miller, the writer. And so, you know, we're used to hearing us being called, you know, Lavender Menace and all this other bullshit. So, you know, kind of accepted the fact that women who were not in the GLF were not going to have a consciousness about much of anything. And so one day, the very first article about the women's movement was written by Susan Brown Miller in the New York Times Magazine section. And in it, she called us a lavender herring, perhaps, but surely no clear and present danger. Well, I was so angry that the next time we had a dance, I made a t-shirt that said lavender herring, and everybody loved that t-shirt. And of course, that t-shirt led to the Lavender Menace action, where we we forced the straight women to think about lesbianism. So that was just, you know, and unfortunately, I never dated anyone that wasn't political at that time, so I don't really know, but anyway, that's...
On the note of the action that now, I want to acknowledge Francine Wyman, who's in the audience, who was at that action, who was a member of GLF for many, many years, and was one of our resident poet laureates, editing the first collection of We Are All Lesbians. This is the first poetry collection by lesbians in the country, 1973, and several books of poetry. Her first one, looking at women, went into several editions. Very rare for a poetry book. And so, as far as the mindset of people who weren't in GLF, well, there was a lot of sexism in GLF, but there was a lot more outside of GLF. I felt like I was on a soapbox every other moment. You know, you just said, what? And these are my friends, people that know. And GLF, because it was so profound, such a profound experience for all of us, or most of us, really, you know, I could say I went to the, you know, we still went to dance. I went to dance at bars, if there wasn't a dance that week, sort of. And I would say, you know, have you ever thought of coming to the Gay Liberation Front or Radical? What's that? So I said, oh, we don't need that. We're fine right here. Now, right here was a dance floor about 6 by 6 in the back of a bar, where you could only do and say certain things. So it was a long unpacking for the whole community, you know, whatever aspect of the community that you were involved in, or however you identified yourself in particular. The amount of negativity that we had been bombarded with at such a young age, as Perry spoke about so movingly. You know, and then you try on a one-to-one basis. Kept trying to change that. When I happened to have the good fortune of traveling to Europe as kind of a business agent for a theater group, and every city I went to, Berlin, Amsterdam, London, I just had to breathe GLF. They said, come and speak to us. You know, and there, you know, I was in a room with hundreds of people, and suddenly I heard my name, and I said, yes, I only, you know, and they wanted to hear about GLF, because I was in progressive circles, in a general sense, and I think so GLF was not only in this country, in New York and in San Francisco, and then fanning out to the larger cities, but it became a
International movement? International.
not international. It became kind of the word that said, you know, this oppression is going to change.
Yes. Yeah, it actually, the term GLF became almost generic for a while for the gay movement. So much so that when John Lindsay was mayor of New York, there was a big demonstration by some of the brothers from Gay Activist Alliance, which was a group that split off from GLF and was very, very male-dominated group. Like probably 90% of the membership of the GAA was male, whereas GLF started off 50-50 men and women. Anyway, they were picketing and protesting John Rachel Lindsay, who was very homophobic, although he was a progressive. And Lindsay looked at them and said, "Would the gentleman from the Gay Liberation Front please calm down?" And one of them said, "We're not from GLF, we're from GAA." But the term Gay Liberation Front, it had acquired this distinction as meaning that these were people who no longer were going to take the oppression of being queer. That it was just a complete change in consciousness.
To Carrie's point, one of the things I tell, yes, I do a lot of speaking with the Generations Project. We go to colleges and schools and whatever. And one of the stories I tell them is, in 1970, I think it was August of 1970, we went to Philadelphia for the rewriting of the Constitution.
Yes.
And at that conference, Huey Newton stood up and gave a very important speech. Huey Newton was the head of the Black Panthers, if you don't know. And in that speech, he called the Gay Liberation Front the most radical of all of the groups, and said he never wanted to hear the word faggot or queer out of other people's mouths, and that the Black Panthers were going to work and respect the Gay Liberation Front because nobody was going to tell us what to do with our bodies.
It was a life-changing moment in the entire movement. Yes, it was. When I say the entire movement, well, that was a term we used in those days to mean not simply the gay movement, you know, the let's say LGBT movement, but also the peace movement, the civil rights movement, the women's movement. This statement from Huey Newton was a life-changing moment.
I just want to add a point. One of the things he also said in that speech was that gays and lesbians might be the most oppressed group in this society.
Yes.
Did anyone hear that?
Oh.
No.
One of the things Huey Newton said in that speech was that gay and lesbians might be the most oppressed group in our society, which was an extraordinary thing for a Black Panther and a Black activist
He did
to
say
say.
that. Huey
Yeah.
Newton said that gays and lesbians may be the most oppressed people in the world. He did say that, yes.
We're talking about radicalism. I guess this is a 2 or 3 part question, but you know, there's been over 500 anti-LGBTQ bills submitted and passed in the nation this year. What can the movement do now? Is there a movement to reclaim the radical spirit of the GLF?
That is the question. That's a $69,000 question. Let me tell you. Yes, the thing that the movement has got to do is it's got to leave its corporativity, its protectionism, its conformity, and get back to where we were. And a lot of that is going to have to come from younger people than we are. Certainly, people in their 20s and 30s and teens, maybe. And also, we have this idea that we're going to do all this online, and I beg to differ with that. This has got to be a movement in the streets and in people's neighborhoods, and it's got to be visible in lifetime.
I currently work with the Lesbian History Archives, We're approaching our 50th anniversary. And the reason I'm saying that is because we have, and the reason I work with them is because the beliefs that GLF exemplified, the radical beliefs of the 70s, the archive continues with those beliefs today. We teach from experienced people, experienced archivists, as we call ourselves, or archivettes. That's the word I'm saying. Archivettes to less experienced ones. Our coordinator board has women from 85 to 18, and everybody has a say. We are intersectional in every possible way. Some of our members have transitioned. We have people who, and I can't, I'm sort of losing my words. We collect work by and about anybody who connects with the word lesbian. They don't have to be famous. You're cleaning out your apartment, you found some love letters from 40 years ago, and you're going to dump them? No, give them to us at the archives. You have a photo book that you at some part of your life you no longer want to be reminded about. Do not put it in the trash, give it to us. So we document the lives of lesbians across the country and even across the world. We have connections with queer and lesbian archives in South Africa, Australia, and India. Those are the first that come to mind. We participated in a conference of independent radical archives across the world in Madrid. I just got the book translated into Spanish and English, every essay. It just arrived. I had it read. I'm so happy about it. And I want to show you, and this will get right back to GLS, because in my essay, I have work by I don't know about this lavender thing, but I guess, lavender is so symbolic, by Michela and by friend Wyman. Anyway, so I think that, speaking to Terry's comment, that it cannot be done online. We also archive online communication, but it's true. We have, I feel it's a direct extension of my work with GLF, and we're all there.
So I want to ask Michela one more question, and then I'm going to say something, and Perry's going to read a poem. But the closing question, Michela, is what happens when we surrender to assimilation?
I had a much different idea about closing, in that I was going to say that how much the Gay Liberation Front has consistently been a part of my life, in that when AIDS hit our community, at that time the lesbians and the gay men were not speaking to each other, and when AIDS hit our community, we realized that we were dying, and that's what brought the lesbians and the gay men back together again. I was so, horrified at the way, because I got sober in 1980. I got sober and clean at NA, so these men had the double whammy. They were both gay, IV drug users for the most part, and I wanted my
queer life at the end of the 1960s, into the beginning of the 1970s, when something is happening every moment. It's reflected in the newspaper. So you can get it in blur online. The hardback edition is too expensive. It's like $60. But the digital edition is only like $6, so you're not going to even get that. But you get to see the excitement of this movement and this group.
Thank you. Now I'm going to do my plug. So, I've been doing this since I was 13 years old, and my role with all this has changed. Last week, I talked to an 80-year-old about doing suicide. Today, I got an email from a closeted lesbian asking for help, and I'm sneaking candy bars into the hospital when people are dying. And we're a nonprofit organization, and any possible donation would greatly help us. For example, we have the P.O. Box renewal coming up, and it would be great to get this interview and conversation transcribed and online and out there. So Shelby, who is the secretary of the LGBTQ History Project, is going to pass around a bag, and there's a couple QR codes if anyone has it in their heart to donate even $2 really helps the cause and the possibility for us to do more talks and panels and intergenerational dialogues like this. So we're going to go to Q&As, but before that, Harry's going to read a poem that he wrote at the time, or an excerpt from it that he feels sums up the sentiments of the time.
This is a poem that was published in the Mail News. The Mail News is the first openly gay anthology of poetry ever published. And there were several anthologies that were kind of covert that came out earlier. It was edited by Ian Young, and it came out in 1972. I was the second youngest poet in it. So I have this poem called I Have This Vision of Madness, and I feel that it really kind of encapsulates what it was like to be a young man in jail. And it's a long poem, so I'm just going to read the last part of it. The poignant hour of the day has come, when evening tells its own story. When you go out of your house to find your true love in the banana forests, in the rain gardens of Central Park, in the steaming beaches of baths and bars, when the heat of desire has frozen your lust, has bent your heart into 1,000 masturbatory images that cannot be fulfilled, and only some urgent insanity, some call to reach and touch and reach back, will find me waiting in the lobby of your heart, all the time hoping that you will come, full of rage and crazy kindness. And I think that really just shows, that was so much what Gila was about, was that sense of rage and crazy kindness. We really wanted that for each other and with the world.
Thank you, Harry. Flavia?
I would like to suggest that perhaps Karen Wyman would read an excerpt from her poem, Physical Street, June 28, 1970, that has been anthologized and translated into numerous languages across the world.
I'm an artist, so you'll have to look at me on Instagram or just Google my name, and you'll see my paintings are, and my work is very political. At some point,
Anyone have some questions? Go ahead.
How much it will be, and like you were saying before, nobody was saying before, we have a new rise of Christian National that this money, because money doesn't come from the sky, this money they're promoting the hate international. For example, in Uganda and in America. In Uganda, they passed a law that is against LGBTQ. So what is your opinion on this Christian National?
So,
I call like it is, but it's okay.
so maybe we'll do one person can answer each question. I'll take this one.
No, this is really not a matter for opinion. It's horrendous. You know, I remember saying, I was talking to Fran one day, and I said, well, you know, we changed the world, we made it, you know, we saved. And I didn't say exactly that. And Fran said, really? You know, and I think the lesson is we have to keep struggling. Even if you're comfortable at the moment, where you are, how you are, you still have to keep struggling. You have to work. And for example, I have been working with the archives for 15 years. Nobody gets paid. You have to keep working politically, even if it's making it uncomfortable, because we cannot take our freedom for granted. It's just as simple as that. And every one of us can make a huge difference.
Anyone else? Question?
I'd like to just say that we take who we are everywhere into the world. So that I worked in a corporation for 16 years. I never changed the pronoun. I never said, oh, he and I. It was always, I was just who I am. I take that with me when I go to the poorest parts of the country where these evangelical, you know, and I sit and I talk with gay people in these small towns, especially the transgender women, and I find that they're you know, I said, do you get proper medical care? Do you have community? You know, we have to keep putting ourselves out there. Nobody is going to do it for us. And I just, one last thing. In my studio, I'm a painter, but in my studio, I have a saying, and it's from Marsha P. Johnson. Someday the world is going to come and they're going to try to divide us. And when they divide us, they will conquer us. And I feel that that time is happening now. Because we knew it was going to come. We stood up to Anita Bryant and all that. It was the biggest march we had. She thought everybody was going to, you know, hide in the closet. People came out in the closets in the room. She was the best thing that ever happened to the neighborhood.
This situation, reminds me of a wonderful quote from Dick Gregory. He was asked, what did you think about the white backlash? And he said, there's no such thing as the white backlash, there's just the white hate frontlash. And this is simply, again, a sexist frontlash. I mean, it's always going to be there. I grew up in this world of, you know, religious bigots in the South, totally segregated, totally bigoted. So what's going on now is just simply a replay of my childhood and my growing up and adolescence. And I find it disgusting, but I realize this is an aspect of life, certainly in this country and a lot of other countries. There's certainly an aspect of life in Uganda, Kenya, Africa. And it's now happening in Turkey, in a Muslim country, where Recep Erdogan, who is Donald Trump's asshole buddy, he's sweeping through some of the ugliest anti-gay and anti-queer laws in the Western world, because Turkey is now part of NATO. So, like, you've got to do something about that. I want to be very much in solidarity with our Turkish sisters and brothers. I really do. We've got to have this feeling that they're not alone.
you bring some sort of consensus of this is what we want to ask for. This needs to be our message for right now. I think a lot of groups, I think Black Lives Matter has been challenged with that. They build the support, they get people excited, but then what are they asking for? How can they come together to agree that this is what we want to ask for this year? This is the change, that the specific change we want to see.
Well, I'm thinking, and going back to GLF, the attitude of GLF, what I'm talking about is that part of the GLF mindset was that what I would call our queer feelings, our love for each other, this was paramount. This was something to fight for, and we would fight for this. And we often did just amazingly crazy things and crazy actions. There was a horrible situation in August of 1970, right after the first LGBT march, this was the Liberation Day march, when we found out that the cops were busting several hustler bars in Times Square. So, at the GLF meeting, even though we were against the male prostitution, we're against the prostitution of any form, we thought it was just capitalist exploitation. We had to side with our brothers who were these oppressed hustlers. We put on this amazing demonstration in Times Square, but this is how we work towards this sense of unity.
I think that the question as follows, how do you reach consensus? I don't think you'll ever reach a real consensus among everyone in that room. We realize that people approach problems from different point of view, different things are important to different people, and I don't mean different groups or gender or any other orientation, that people feel for different issues and they want to work on them. And so we do have a set of manifestos and standards that were published by it was a group of gay men. Yes, Gay Flames published a group of papers, and each one addresses in the most revolutionary sense how things can be changed. This is a problem that has been misnamed and misdescribed, and that's very important in reaching not a consensus perhaps, but reaching elements that people want to work for. Whatever description you give it, it's probably wrong. It's not just, that you can clear, take that little clear part out and then you go to work for it and do something else. It's that every description is obviously, it doesn't have to be purposefully, store manager. A ladder
Wild by Night. Two novellas of gay love, power, innocence, and deception. So, it's my 21st book. So, I've always known they come directly from my experience in GLF. They all did.
Woo!